So, when you think about China's military, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably those huge, perfectly synchronized parades, right? Or maybe their super advanced fighter jets. It's this image of just overwhelming strength. But what if there's a whole other side to that story? I mean, on paper, the numbers are just jaw-dropping. The People's Liberation Army is the biggest active military on the planet. They've got more ships than the U.S. Navy, and their arsenal of high-tech gear seems to grow literally by the day. The whole perception is one of this unstoppable force. But what if that carefully polished image is, well, just an image? What if all that paper is actually hiding some really deep systemic cracks? You see, recent intelligence reports are suggesting that the reality inside China's military might be a lot different from the story they're selling to the world. Okay, now this is where it gets really wild. Just look at the contrast here. On one side, you've got the public perception, a massive high-tech superpower. But on the other side, you've got these shocking allegations from our source material. We're talking about soldiers literally crying before heading into a conflict, missiles filled with water, and an army that's built on forcing people to serve, not on any kind of real conviction. So let's dig into this, starting with the hardware itself. You know, the missiles, the jets, the tanks. Is all that gear really as tough as it looks? Let's start with a big number. China reportedly has over 350 intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Now, to put that in perspective, that's actually more than the United States has. It's a seriously intimidating figure, one that suggests a massive, world-ending capability. But hold on, because here comes the bombshell. According to a U.S. intelligence report that Bloomberg got a hold of, there's a tiny problem. Many of those missiles are allegedly filled with water instead of rocket fuel. I mean, think about it. A weapon that can't launch isn't really a weapon, is it? It's just a very, very expensive metal tube. And it doesn't even stop there. The same intelligence reports claim that the lids on their missile silos out in Western China don't actually work right, meaning they couldn't even launch them effectively if they wanted to. The big takeaway here is that a lot of these weapons might be nothing more than showpieces for parades. And this isn't just an internal problem. It extends to the gear they sell to other countries too. So this all raises a huge question, right? Where did they get all this technology in the first place? And that brings us to our next point, the pretty serious allegation that China's military tech isn't so much about innovation as it is about imitation. The alleged game plan is basically a two-step process. First, you use cyber espionage, hacking essentially, to steal the blueprints for advanced weapons from countries like the US. Then, you use a technique called reverse engineering. You get your hands on the real thing, take it apart, piece by piece, and just copy it. And you can really see what they're talking about right here. On the left, you've got the American F-35 and the Russian Su-33. And on the right, their Chinese counterparts, the J-31 and J-15. The visual similarities are just uncanny. It leads a lot of experts to believe they're pretty much direct copies. But here's the thing. Copying something isn't the same as truly understanding how it works. And the proof, as they say, is in the pudding, or in this case, in the performance. We're seeing a growing list of countries who bought Chinese military hardware and are now reporting major failures, from air defense systems and tanks in Pakistan to fighter jets in Myanmar and other gear sold to places like Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Argentina. Let's look at one specific, kind of embarrassing example. Back in February 2019, just a few hours before an Indian airstrike, the Pakistani Defense Public Relations team sent out this tweet. Super confident, right? They were bragging about their brand new Chinese-made air defense system. And the result? A total bust. The Indian jets reportedly flew right into Pakistani airspace, dropped their bombs, and flew back home without a scratch. That fancy new Chinese system? It didn't detect them, it didn't alert anyone, and it sure as heck didn't neutralize the threat. Whoops. Okay, so if the hardware is shaky, what about the people who are supposed to operate it? This brings us to the human factor, where our source material alleges there's an even deeper crisis going on. The signs of low morale are pretty jarring. You might have seen that viral video from 2020. It allegedly shows a bunch of new recruits just openly sobbing on a bus as they're being sent to the Indian border for potential clashes. And then there were reports back in 2016 that Chinese UN peacekeepers in South Sudan just abandoned their posts and ran away when they came under fire. To really get why this might be happening, you have to look back at China's famous, or maybe infamous, one-child policy. For over 35 years, most families could only have one kid. The source for this story argues that this created a whole generation of what they called little emperors, single children who are the one and only focus of all their parents' and grandparents' hopes and fears. And this chart really shows the result. According to an international report cited in our source, a mind-boggling 70% of soldiers in China's army today are only children. Just let that sink in. These are young men whose families are understandably terrified of sending them into harm's way. So here's the kicker. Military service is mandatory. But these kids who are already reluctant to be there are then thrown into an environment where they have basically zero freedom. They can't leave their posts, they can't take vacations, they can't travel abroad. It sounds less like a call of duty and more like a prison sentence, which, you can imagine, does wonders for motivation. Now, when you mix poor motivation with forced service, well, you create the perfect breeding ground for two other massive problems: terrible training and out-of-control corruption. According to a report from the well-respected RAND organization, the lack of realistic training is just severe. It claims Chinese pilots struggle with basic stuff, like hitting targets on the ground, and, maybe even more importantly, they can't make their own decisions in a fight. They're constantly having to radio back to command for permission for every little thing. 1.28 million. That is the number of corruption cases they found inside the Chinese military in 2023 alone. That's according to the New York Times, cited in our source. It's a number so huge, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around it. So if soldiers aren't motivated and they're not well trained, how do they move up the ranks? Well, the source claims the answer is simple: bribery. Apparently, it's become the main shortcut for getting a promotion. This means leadership positions aren't filled based on skill or merit, but on who has the deepest pockets. And that kind of thing just rots an organization from the inside out. So it all leaves us with this one big question. We see the giant parades, we see the impressive numbers on paper. But real military strength has always been about more than that. It's about technology, sure, and training, but it's also about something you can't really count: the will to fight. So is a military's true strength really found in its size, or is it found in the spirit of its soldiers? That's really the heart of this whole paper tiger debate.